I want to market my business and make an obscene amount of money, but I don't want to be sleazy about it. What do I do?
You've come to the right place. You look at any industry and you start to see the massive impact and pain. And we're in like an apocalyptic time when it comes to modern capitalism, okay? And that goes back to this question we were talking about earlier, which is like, I want to build a brand, but I don't want to be sleazy. And the problem isn't the tactics. The problem is people waking up to how capitalism works. When you have to become a business owner, no longer are you a passive consumer just going to the grocery store and buying things and being like, am I being stalked by this company? Do they know too much? Then suddenly you become part of this. You have to do that. And yes, there are ways to mitigate harm and there's ways to do it more responsibly and sustainably, but the system itself is based on manipulation and it's based on profit ultimately comes from a few places and it's almost always from human labor or from resources, from selling things for less than they're worth. That catches up to you somehow. Welcome to Marketing Muckraking, the show that asks not simply what brand culture can do for us, but what it's doing to us. With your host, creative director, and brand strategist gone wild, Rachel K. Albers, making fun of business and making business fun. This is the show for rebels, revolutionaries, and renegades who run businesses that burn the rule book. If you're sick of business podcasts that have all the answers, well, I got nothing but questions. Let's go. Episode 13, Think and Grow Rich? The truth about Napoleon Hill, America's first thought leader in the age of the personal brand. I originally recorded this CoMuckraking edition of the podcast on Instagram Live in June 2021 as part of Free School. Just as I was beginning the research for the book I was really meant to write, without knowing it. I'm bringing it back because I just saw a trailer for Think and Grow Rich, the movie. And while there is more to that book and the upcoming movie than you may know, I leave you on a cliffhanger at the end of the storytelling, so let me know if you want me to record a part 2 with the rest of the story. Now for some CoMuckraking.
I want to market my business and make an obscene amount of money, but I don't want to be sleazy about it. What do I do?
You've come to the right place. Welcome to CoMuckraking. Good day to you. We're talking about personal branding today. We're talking about thinking and growing rich. We're talking about capitalism. We're talking about how to build a business without being sleazy, how to build a brand. A brand, though. How to build a brand, though.
Without being sleazy, though. I want to make an obscene amount of money, but I don't want to be gross about it, if that makes sense.
You know what? I have been saying for years that to be a white American is to have no culture because our culture is just stealing other people's cultures and making money off of it. But yeah, I guess that is what it is. Oh, it's just being total hucksters and scam artists. And that's what I want to talk to today in the spirit of building a brand that isn't sleazy. You know what I'm saying? Sleaze-free sales and marketing. I just want to feel good, from the heart, capitalism, but with a conscience. Is that a thing? I don't know. And this is what CoMuckraking really was about. When I started just hopping on here to do CoMuckraking, the original vision wasn't that it was going to be a series. The whole idea was, at the time I was doing my kind of research, if you will, about the Josh Harris, Donald Miller story brand situation. And CoMuckraking was born out of the desire to get on live and hold myself accountable and be doing the work of, moving this conversation off of my stories, even off of live video and putting it on the record, getting it on my website, turning it into a blog post, making sure that I'm archiving this information, documenting what I'm finding as I go. That was one of the original goals of CoMuckraking. And there was an element of it that was y'all go out and do your own thing and let this be, a reminder to you for whatever you want to be putting on the record. And I kind of see it a little bit as just a way to dig deeper into these questions of marketing in pursuit of meaning, which is one of my goals and my passions and my interests right now, right? If you've been along this journey at all, or if you haven't, this year, after 12 years of building up my branding, messaging, design agency, earlier this year, I kind of set fire to it. I'm on sabbatical right now. I'm also getting a divorce. I'm also estranged from my family. I also, right? So all those things happened this year, which kind of lays the foundation for what I'm about to tell you, which is I've had a lot of kind of taps on my shoulder. Here's why I'm saying that. At the very beginning of the year, I started doing this fun thing, what I thought at the time was a fun thing, in my Instagram stories that was called Free School. And it was kind of this little pushback a pushback at what have become kind of like the modern rules of online marketing, which already have started to erode for a lot of reasons. Some of these rules being, you've got to send people through a very specific type of funnel. You got to get them with a freebie and hook them with a freebie and take them into an email sequence. And then you've got to kind of like nurture and manipulate the next steps through that, and possibly partnered based on what you're selling and when, with ads and retargeting and all of that good stuff, right? And those things aren't inherently bad or wrong. They can be very helpful parts of a strategy for sure. And though they became kind of like calcified, they became kind of like codified as like the law of how we do things here. And first of all, they don't work for every business model. And oftentimes can also lead to the demise of a business if, like dumping money into ads and things like that. Lots and lots of things around that. And so I kind of started to push back doing free school, which was like, I was going to just show up and teach all of my courses and stuff within my Instagram stories. Show up and basically just pour out all of my expertise and kind of like tips and tricks, if you will, but without an opt-in and without an email nurture sequence and all that kind of stuff. That's how it started. And then suddenly I burned down my whole life and my relationship to the industry that I was in, right? Why am I giving you this backstory though? I'm telling you because there's been now a lot of pressure, even from within myself, and then questions from the outside of, all right, what's your next move? What's the answer now? You've laid out a really good case. And though I feel like we're just getting started with whatever case is being laid out here. But there's this question of, okay, what do we do instead? And also, like, what are you going to sell next, right? Because obviously, necessarily, I've taken a sabbatical from my agency. I've taken a sabbatical from my work. And so there is a question for me, before I sell anything myself, personally, what is my relationship to branding and marketing? Because for me, what happened over the course of this year has been, none of this was a surprise or a shock, truly. It was a culmination of the things I had observed and didn't want to believe that I was seeing. And yet now that I've admitted out loud, I've said out loud the quiet parts, right? I've said to the world, me personally, some of the observations I've had about marketing and personal branding. And there's some real troubled aspects of like how this has evolved into our modern way of doing business. It's very new because of the internet. Well, now there is necessarily a shift that must be made. Okay. I'm on this quest. Like I am reviewing my relationship with personal branding. And part of this is diving into the history of advertising and marketing and personal branding. I'm like, dude, there are some holes in my understanding of how the personal brand specifically has evolved to where we are at today in the modern internet age, every person being a personal brand. And that's what CoMuckraking is all about, by the way, to encourage myself to deepen my understanding of these topics, to be putting things on the record, to be researching, to be reflecting. What I became an expert in? How to build a brand for the sake of it. I am an expert in that. And I'm great at messaging. I can take a business through the steps of reconstructing their business model, their messaging strategy, their copywriting, the visual language. No matter what the message is, I can do that. Being an expert on just communicating a message to an audience, right? And I think a lot of us in the business sphere, a lot of the folks that I connect with online are somehow in that space of being excellent communicators. You know how many friends I have that are amazing copywriters, creatives, designers, strategists, thought leaders, authors, all of that kind of stuff. But we have kind of reached this fever pitch of living in a time where the emphasis is on communication for the sake of it, branding for the sake of it, or for the sake of money, and that's it, right? So I'm on this odyssey, I'm on this quest. That's what CoMuckraking is all about. And so I challenged myself today to start really deepening my understanding of the history of personal branding, because I think it's important. When we look at history, it really helps us understand how we got here. History predicts the future. It really does. So I had some fun today. I got a lot of notes. I've learned some things today, actually. So this is what CoMuckraking is all about. Knowing I was going to come on here and I had to actually bring some new info. My early CoMuckraking was a lot of me presenting the observations I've had and accumulated for years. But now it's like I'm diving into some new shit. Oh my God. And it's better than I thought. It's better than I thought. And there's not enough research about this modern iteration, and personal brands. I think a lot of people are focusing on wellness and spirituality and MLMs. But then there's this middle ground. It's the life coaching online business realm. And it's not as covered when we're diving into influencers and their impact and their cultural impact and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people talking about spirituality, QAnon, wellness, all that shit. I'm into it. And there's even like, there's like the culty stuff kind of flowing around. There's a little bit of the, but man, the online business space, not directly MLMs though, right? Not the overt MLMs, but here's where we're going to get crazy today. So let's get back to this question of, I hear it, I've heard it for years, and I myself have like been on a quest to help people alleviate this pain point, which is I want to build a brand, but I don't want to be sleazy.
It's just like, I want to like be a brand, but I don't want to be like a brand. But like, I want to be one, but I don't want to like be one, but like, I want to be me, but like also like, I just like want to make money, but like, I don't want to have to like work. I just want to like, no, I'm kidding. That's not really the majority of the people that I end up working with. Not at all. But they're out there. They've talked to me. Anybody that I have ever worked with has the desire to market and build a brand and a business in a non-sleazy way. I have, I guess, had the opportunity to work with sleaze bags. They have come through my doors, but I think there's ultimately a repellent in me. I've kissed too many asses in other ways that these are the asses I wasn't able to fully kiss. And sometimes I regretted it because like I would have a sales call with somebody and they were like a douche-orama. And I felt it so like I wasn't like trying to like make it happen with that person. And then they become famous. And I'm like, I could have had them in my motherfucking Rolodex. This is back when I was trying to play the game. I was like, argh! But now I feel good about it. I'm like, I feel good. So I realized today that I had my focus when I was helping people navigate this territory. I had my focus in the wrong place, and it was on the tactics versus the environment. So everybody's interested in, give me the swap for, I want a non-sleazy marketing plan. I want a non-sleazy branding guide. I want a non-sleazy business model. I want a non-sleazy, and here's the rub. How did I not see it before? I don't know, but I did, and now I see it. And it is this. Yes, there are certainly what we could all agree are sleazy manipulative tactics out there. But I think what's really going on here when it comes to people, when you enter the business space and you become a small business owner and you have to start branding, either if it's a company or it's yourself. When you enter the space and you start to do that, it's kind of like when you start to do any work. If you're doing work on yourself in therapy, if you're doing work to be a better human being, the more work you do on those things, the more you realize how fucked up shit is, right? When you become a small business owner, you have to start thinking like a capitalist, because now you're not just like going through life consuming things and just like going to work and not really worrying about, like, you have a salary, you do your job, and that's it. And you go and you get your money and you go and you buy things with it. But when you start working for yourself and you have a business that you have to promote, you become your own HR, your own everything, your own marketing team, your own logistics, your own, janitor, clean, all of the things. And when you become your own marketing team, which is actually like, people want to think about that as like my marketing over here, 10% of my business. No, it's like 60% of a business's success is going to come down to marketing. Like, at least I'm making that up. I don't know if that's like a statistical truth, but that's just my gut. It's more than a little. Let's just say that. It's a lot. It's the most. It's a lot of it. It's at least half is marketing. People start to wake up to that. Then what they have to do is they have to become a real agent. They have to understand the rules of capitalism a little bit better than we do as passive consumers of companies and shit. So when you become a business owner, you have to start thinking about how to sell people. You have to think of your fucking product. You have to think of who wants it. You have to think about why they want it. And, modern marketing, because of cable TV and like the radio and shit, that's why we had to have all these like sophisticated audience research tools made available to us and stuff like that, because we can. And because it will make you more money to know your audience intimately and be able to maneuver and control them and their behavior based statistically on like how well you know them and how they behave, right? So you become a small business owner, suddenly you have to learn the rules of the game. Unless you are coming from wealth and capital and you have enough money to literally be able to hire the best of the best, that you can actually say to somebody, take the entire marketing shit off of my plate and I don't even want to touch it. The only way you could ever do that is if you had basically a blank check, because that shit is expensive. Otherwise, you're going to have to be involved in your marketing. You as the CEO, as a small business founder, is like, if you're starting a business, you are going to have to be involved in your marketing probably forever. We become small business owners and then we have to become aware of how the sausage gets made, right? That's when people say, I want to do this, but I don't want to be sleazy. That statement, when people say that, is more an acknowledgement that they are starting to recognize that the ways of capitalism, the ways of modern business are inherently destructive and harmful. So it's almost like a negotiation with reality, and people come to folks like me who they can see that I am identifying myself partially around my values. And yes, being ethical is important to me, and I make that a part of my branding. So when folks come to me, it's like they're saying, I think that this person, this company, this
whatever might have a magic pill to make capitalism less horrible. So what I'm trying to say here is the sleaze is coming from inside the industry. The call is coming from inside the house, meaning there is no like do no harm way to live these days. You can't live in this world and not do harm. Same thing I think is what when people wake up to the way that business is, they start to get upset and distressed because they realize that it is profitable to be manipulative. It is profitable to take advantage of people. They will be more profitable if they do that. And then they start wanting to they want to negotiate their way out of that reality. And the reality is capitalism and how it works. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be profitable without, but the reality is there's no do no harm. Somehow down the line in the supply chain of capitalism, you know, I always think about like, I'm surrounded by things like this IKEA shelf. And like, you think about every single part of this, from the lumber to the paint to who assembled it to how it got shipped to where I ended up buying it, and the amount of folks along that route that probably were in some way paid or compensated less, or the resources were taken away originally for less than they should have been. That's how capitalism works. So this, I want to market my business, I want to build a brand, but I don't want to be sleazy, is more of an acknowledgement of the truth of the system than it is an actual realistic 100% attainable goal. And there is also the grief in acknowledging that I'm not saying that people can't make money without being complete and utter assholes, but there needs to be an acknowledgement that ethical business will cost you something. And it is more profitable to be unethical. And the art of branding really rides a very delicate line that I think it's hard. I think we've all kind of within this modern economic system come to accept advertising and marketing as a necessary evil. But I am necessarily pulling back and reflecting on this myself as a branding professional in the game for 12 years, having studied it for longer. And I'm like, why are we giving advertising and marketing a pass? So today I am talking about doing a further investigation along the lines of the history of personal branding. And we ain't done yet. This is like a summer series. We're coming back for more. This is a bottomless pit, I can already tell. So here's what I found inadvertently as I tried to track the history of the personal brand to really understand how it evolved to where it is today. And I will tell you, I learned a little bit about Napoleon Hill, the original. I gotta tell you, this guy is like a hybrid. He's Tony Robbins, got a little touch of Donald Miller, a little bit Ty Lopez, a lot bit Russell Brunson, maybe even Richard Branson, I think I put in there, and more, and on and on. You could like add your favorites in there. It is like a dick funnel smoothie. That's Napoleon Hill. It's mind-blowing. And so if you go to Wikipedia, let's just start at the basics, people. If you go to Wikipedia, I think they actually have a pretty good description. I was like, you know what? Okay. What is personal branding? What is personal branding according to a crowdsourced encyclopedia, which, you know, it's a conscious intention. Okay, this is important. Conscious, intentional effort to create and influence public perception of an individual by positioning them as an authority in their industry, elevating their credibility, differentiating themselves from their competition, advancing their career, and increasing their circle of influence. Okay. It goes on to say that this is all tied into monetization. Like that's what makes it a brand versus just like being a person, right? Because when you say that, isn't that what it is to be a fucking person? That's my first thing here is like, as I describe branding in all of like the years that I've done it, but then people want you to describe it. You have to give speeches on it and shit like that. I mean, branding really is, it's like your thought. It's like memories of a thing. It's like memories of a company. But then when you make it memories of a person, it's a personal brand. That's where it gets weird. It's like, my brain, it hurts. Scrambled, the tiny Tony Scramble. He scrambled me. So that's personal branding. In the 90s, the modern personal brand where people were really encouraged to brand themselves started like picking up speed in the 90s, really. And these folks, they wrote this book called Be Your Own Brand. David McNally and Carl Spirik, I think. I don't know. I fucked it up. Sorry, Carl. But I like this quote. And it was, your brand is a perception or emotion. I'm like, yeah, it is. It is. That's what it fucking is. It's a memory. It's a feeling. A brand is a fucking feeling. That's what it is. That's why it's so hard to describe, because it's a feeling. It's maintained by somebody other than you. That's what's really crazy about it. Your brand is in the eye of the beholder. Oh my God. That describes the total experience of having a relationship with you. Okay, let's say that again. Your brand is a perception or emotion maintained by somebody other than you. That describes the total experience of having a relationship with you. Yep, that's it. That's actually really good. That's what I always try to say and I can never say. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you, Be Your Own Brand. But they weren't are really the real originators of the, like, obviously people have been talking about packaging and presenting and like positioning yourself for way longer than the 90s. So, you know, the question that I had as I was diving into this topic was, in this day and age, the personal brand has extended to everyone in a way because of social media, because of the internet, because like employers look and Google a person's name and what they experience in connection with also what an employer would experience in a Google search result for a person, combined with their interactions with that person, combined with whatever the person like sent them, like a resume, picture, combined with also like whatever like perceptions just come up when you see the person's name or you see them for the whatever, all this shit, right? That's the brand. And so when you think about the way that the economy has evolved, where it's like so much fewer of us are like on farms and shit. Either you are like a commodity to be bought by a company or you commodify yourself. In the age of the internet, we all have a brand. Like people buy up their kids' domain names when they're born now and like lock down their social media handles just in case. Then I ask myself the question, here's what makes this different than always. Well, in that context, weren't we always brands then? If we're all within the capitalist system essentially being monetized and either we're going to work for the man or we become the man to ourselves, hasn't this always existed, RKA? What's the problem? How is this different? What's changed? What has changed is the internet and the ability to manipulate and control our personal brands in much more elaborate ways than ever before. Because back in the day, yeah, you could say that you had a brand, you know, word of mouth, talk on the street, combined with people's experiences of you is your brand. Yet, because of the social media and the internet, we are able to control and manipulate like the average bear. You don't have to be rich anymore to possibly influence and control your brand narrative, right? Like you really don't. But here's where it got crazy. This is where shit went off the rails. This is where I got taken on a motherfucking adventure today. And that was when I looked back at really, if you look at some of like the early discussions of like packaging yourself and selling your ideas, that actually gets tracked back to Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich in 1937 during the Great Depression. And listen, I always hear people fucking reference this book. I'm sure I've read tons of quotes. In fact, in my years in the past when I did like stupid social media bullshit for clients or like had to pull up like inspirational quotes to like mock up social media graphics for them, I'm sure I had some Napoleon Hill in my life, okay? But I don't give a fuck about him. And I never read his book. He didn't seem like my vibe. Because people like Donald Trump, Napoleon Hill helped him write his book. I think it was The Power of Positive Thinking. Yeah, that's what it is. So I'm like, this guy ain't for me. This book, Think and Grow Rich, ain't for me. I know everybody who like, as anybody who's read it and is like, it influenced me. But now I know why. If you're in like the self-help or like manifestation or coaching or even small business space, you probably have heard of Napoleon Hill and the book Think and Grow Rich. And it's just kind of like one of the foundational books that people reference as like, I read that and it made me a better person. So Napoleon Hill was essentially invented modern thought leadership. He really was one of the first, let's say the 20th century, to really start this idea of packaging and selling yourself and your ideas. And his most famous book was Think and Grow Rich. But y'all, this guy had a storied career and it is like reading the old-fashioned tale of Tony Robbins, Donald Miller, Ty Lopez, Russell Brunson, a little touch of Richard Branson. I mean, and then just throw a bunch of other fuckers in there. It's like the Dick Funnel smoothie of a man in one place. Also a little Frank Abagnale in there, a little, I can't with Napoleon Hill. So Napoleon Hill is a father of like thought leadership in 1937, but he was in a cult. He was like, also did like sex things that were weird. He had 5 wives. Oh my God, he was a liar. He was a grifter. He was a scam artist. But the way he did it was essentially like predicting the future of modern online marketing. A lot of his kind of foundational ideas come back to like the early Secret, like really The Secret. There was a lot of parallels between what The Secret talks about and bullshit in this book and his books and his general thought leadership, which is just the idea that everything can be controlled by our thoughts. But for him, it was just this very white privileged, like male classist perspective that also was a lie. And so what's fun about Napoleon Hill, when I went on this freaking rabbit hole, because I'm like, all right, I want to learn a little bit more about why and how Napoleon Hill was positioning self-packaging and selling your thought leadership. How was he selling that to the masses in 1937? So we're going to take a little trip back in time. We're going to go all the way back to 1908, basically, almost 30 years before he wrote Think and Grow Rich. But what's interesting is I'm seeing the parallels to now because he originally kind of started becoming famous in 1929 when he wrote his first book, which I think is like The Law of Success or something like that. We'll get to it. But it was really shitty. like objectively written poorly and didn't really make a ton of sense, but it basically sold a prosperity dream. And 1929, you can tell at the time, people wanted a dream. In 1937, this is where he wrote the more famous book. Publishers were kind of like nervous about because they didn't know if folks were going to be interested in the Great Depression in a book about getting rich and about manifesting essentially a better life. But people were. They wanted escape. And this book is full of stories of people who had nothing and rose to incredible fame and fortune. And that is really like the work that he is most famous for. And it has influenced so many modern life coaches, self-help, spiritual guru. I mean, like even, and yet there's a whole story around Napoleon Hill that contextualizes these great promises that inform. They like literally Ty Lopez, all these fuckers, they reference this guy. Donald Trump references this guy. Tony Robbins references this guy. All these people. Now, from what we know now about Napoleon Hill, a lot of his fame and fortune came from making these amazing claims that he had spent his time in the company of some of the world's greatest millionaires and billionaires. Were there, I mean, whatever, at least millionaires back then. Some of the greatest leaders, some of the greatest business leaders, and learned their secrets. Like in his early work, he told people that he had met with Andrew Carnegie. He went around his whole life telling people that he had these big connections to these celebrities, and very few of them had any historical, like we don't have proof of almost any of them. So like I said, Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, which pretty much is like the early secret. And it's all about using your thoughts to like shape your reality and like make a better world. And there is a little bit of stuff in there about self-packaging and self-promotion and our ideas really being like a tradable commodity, all of that shit. Okay, cool. Made him super famous and really helped him continue his grift, because he has a lifetime of basically the life of Napoleon Hill was him sliding around the country, taking and massaging the context strategically that he had to go from one place to the other to kind of build up this whole fictional mythology around himself to get investors, to get opportunities. And then these opportunities blowing up. This guy went bankrupt so many times I can't even count. This guy was constantly like getting foreclosed upon, losing his businesses, had FTC violations. He had numerous warrants out for his arrest at various times in his life, all related to white collar crimes, all related to scams, pretty much financial scams and crimes. There was like a murder he covered up too, which was cool. Damn, we've got some serious like Josh Harris, Donald Miller reshaping history vibes with this guy. And he was able to slither and slide around the world. And so much of what he did just baffled me because I'm like, this is early online marketing. This is the early bro, dick funnel, girl boss predecessor, down to even the prosperity gospel, toxic positive psychology, think your way to success mentality mixed into that. Damn. So in 1908, Napoleon Hill hung out with Andrew Carnegie, who supposedly taught him about the principles of achievement, his secret mastermind alliance vision, and the ultimate secrets to success. So in 1908, Napoleon Hill is going around saying, I hung out with Andrew Carnegie at his huge 64-room mansion or 24-room mansion, one of those. Oh my God, I got such Ty Lopez vibes, it wasn't even funny. I hung out with him at his mansion. He taught me about the secrets to success, about a mastermind alliance in 1908. Now, when there's this researcher, this guy named Matt Kovac, who did a recent like deep dive. He's a reporter. He spent a bunch of time researching this. He even went to the Andrew Carnegie Foundation to try to find proof of this ever happening. And there isn't proof. And Andrew Carnegie never talked about it. There's no records of it. And that's pretty much how it is with all of Napoleon Hill's supposed hanging outs with millionaires and politicians and bullshit. And he just made up a whole lot of bullshit. Okay? Even if it were true, I love this idea of Napoleon Hill, the original dick funnel, the Ranchard Branson of yesteryear, the tiny Tony before Tony was tiny, ahead of his motherfucking time. One of his early grifts and scams, he started this thing called an Automotive College, and he advertised it, got investors, I don't know how, and he advertised it to people as saying, we're going to teach you how to build cars so you can earn between $75 to $200 a week, which at the time, $200 would be the equivalent of saying you're going to make $5,000 a week. So that's $20,000 a month. So this is what he was telling people. Students of this automobile college would come, and at the end of it, they'd be able to earn $75 to $200 a week. But what ended up happening was they were paying to go to school, but they were really making cars for an auto company who was essentially getting free labor. These cars went on the actual market to be sold. So these students were learning how to make cars, but really they were just making cars for basically free. They were paying to make cars. And then In the end, when they were done with college, they were going out and they weren't employable. They weren't making any of the money they said they were going to make. Does this not sound fucking familiar? Earn $5,000 a week with my proven formula. And in reality, what you're doing is you're filling my pockets. What? This is wild to me. This is freaking over 100 years ago. This is some early level dick funnel scammery. I cannot even. So this is one of many businesses and ventures that he had that went completely under. It was a total scam, and he got out of it. The cars were bad. By the way, the cars that they were making were bad. They had a bunch of problems with these cars. So guess what he did, though? Guess what he did? He was able to pivot this company and, I don't know, rescue some amount of money by turning it into, instead of teaching these students how to make cars, then Napoleon Hill turned this into a college where they learned how to sell cars. And so again, they're paying to be able to go to this school where they can learn how to sell. And they earn money. They can earn money on commission for every car they sell. This is a motherfucking multi-level marketing situation. This is some network ass marketing if I've ever fucking heard it in the early 1900s. And what's amazing about it was this guy, like, he had this problem. He's like, I've got this company. I've got investors. I have to get our money back. People are pissed. Oh, wait. Why am I going to teach these people to build cars? I'm going to teach them how to sell them. And then they only really get paid. They get paid if they make on commission. And again, it was the same thing of, the ads for this were like, you could make some totally unrealistic number per week or whatever. Then, I mean, so there's all this shit where he pretended to be an attorney for a while. He got into legal trouble. He's never went to law school. This guy just went around the world, went around the country really, with scam after scam, getting caught, having legal problems, and slithering away. Imagine that there is no Google record. Imagine that people are in these days and age, maybe they'll read a newspaper that this story will get into a national newspaper, but imagine in the like the 1910s and shit, there was no way to so effectively check the reputation of somebody that's coming into your town and saying that Andrew Carnegie told him the secrets to success. Legit. Like a traveling Tai Lopez. Then he starts a new university. He calls it George Washington Institute. Created a bunch of magazines. He made a magazine called Inspiration Magazine. I'm pretty sure he had like Success Magazine. Like, this is like early spiritual life coachy, self-help guru bullshit before you had a blog. He had a magazine. No, before you had a blog, you had a magazine. You started your own fucking magazine. And he had this magazine, one of his magazines, he got in trouble with the FTC because, in April of 1919, in his fucking magazine, he wrote an article with the headline, "An interesting man and his wife who have made $1 million for other people." Quote. So that was the headline. "An interesting man and his wife who have made $1 million for other people." And he got fucking in trouble with the FTC for putting that in his magazine because it was not true. But people were reading this and they're getting hooked on this guy and his ideas because he's preaching this like totally, it's like a get rich fucking quick scheme in the olden days, right? One of his many grifts and scams, he had this thing that he calls the golden rule. It's not the golden rule that we know it as, like treat others as you would want to be treated. No, Napoleon Hill's golden rule is if you give somebody something, they will be indebted to you in some way. And I can't tell you, I mean, you've got to think about how much that is embedded into modern sales and business and marketing psychology. Give somebody something and they will be indebted to you and want to give you something back. All right. And I read that. When I read that, I put it in my notes. I wrote opt-in, cookie, freebie, lead magnet, white paper, PDF, free course, free this. Here you can get my book just for shipping and handling. It's the modern ClickFunnels. It's the modern dick funnel. It's the ancient. Oh my God. And then what he would do, because like, as I said, this guy went from kind of like town to town and city to city, getting in trouble and then sliding away and like using one connection to hop to the next to kind of start over again, right? He is a scam artist. One of the grifts that he had was he would give people awards. He created his own awards system where he would give people awards. His awards were essentially meaningless. He would say 1,000 people voted and 1,000 people said that you were the number one in the Golden Rule Award for whatever, 1920 or whatever, some shit like that. But in reality, nobody had voted. It was an empty, false award that had no real value, but it was a way of continuing to get himself in the headlines and get his brand in the headlines. And when he bestowed an award on, let's say, a strategic person, it helped him to start relationships with people within that organization or whatever. We're talking about Napoleon Hill, the history of the personal brand, the guy who literally was just like scamming people and lying to them, and then he built an entire empire, an entire belief system, an entire way of doing things on the perception that he himself was successful, when in reality, he was just simply successful at tricking people into think he was successful. That's branding. Shit! one of the ways that he continued to like go around and get opportunities and get investors was these fantastic tales that he had that are even in his biographies and stuff about meeting with people like Andrew Carnegie, advising Woodrow Wilson and FDR, which there are actually no historical records or proof of. In most of the cases of Napoleon Hill, he went around saying, I advise the president. I am in the room with millionaires, but there is very little to no proof. One of the only bits of proof that he has of being in the room where it happens is a picture that exists between him and Thomas Edison. This is where it's fucking hilarious. That he went out of his way to do this whole publicity stunt where he got in the room with Thomas Edison and he awarded Thomas Edison a medal. One of these like fake awards that he would do to like get PR. He awarded Thomas Edison with a medal, and the picture was taken of them together. It's very awkward. Nobody's smiling. It's not a great picture. And then Thomas Edison gave the medal back without comment. Just like left, just like slinked away. Like Thomas Edison was like, he didn't know how he got into this photo. He was like, what the fuck? This is sounding very like Keith Raniere. If you followed any of the NXIVM cult shit. So at one point, when he published his first book, The Law of Success, in 1929, a researcher that I read from described it as his first honest dollar. Because yes, he did write the book, and yes, a lot of people bought it, and it did elevate him and his brand. What ended up happening, though, was in order to continue to exude this, he was selling the idea of thinking and growing rich to people. So he was creating a fantastical, wealthy-looking lifestyle. Sound fucking familiar? Sound like a guy in front of a mansion in the Hollywood Hills being like, oh, you're in my backyard. So Napoleon Hill is out there and he has to look as wealthy as he's not. And so right after he got kind of famous and wealthy-ish because of his book Law of Success in 1929, he goes on, spends a ton of money to the point where he buys a big giant estate in the Catskills. But he can't afford it, so he has to get investors. And he gets investors, and how he gets them is he says he's going to create the world's first university-sized success school. And he's going to have people come to his estate and go to his success school university, basically. And one of the things he was going to do is sell vacation homes. Apparently, he sold a couple of them. He sold vacation homes to people on his property who wanted to enjoy the finer things and like indulge and have pleasure, but also wanted to be successful. This is like some Richard Branson come with me on my Bali retreat bullshit. I am living for this. So this fizzles. All of these things I'm describing ended up going kaput. All of his business ventures ended up fizzling. He went bankrupt. He foreclosed on his estate eventually. Like all of his fancy shit, all of his Lamborghinis, if you will. He had a Rolls Royce, which I think he lost. His homes he lost. His businesses he lost. His investments he lost. And he went around pissing people off and like somehow sliding out of it somehow, but then like running away and starting and doing it all over again. And it was always around this concept of success principles, this concept of think and grow rich, this concept of manifesting, fake it till you make it. Yes! This is why I say it's early Russell Brunson, because Russell Brunson's fucking book, Expert Secrets, is sitting around here somewhere so I can use it as a prop. It has that exact concept in it. Russell Brunson himself and most of these folks who like sell the art of the vague personal thought leader brand are essentially selling a version of fake it till you make it. When you think about how profitable it is to fake it, well, you can see why people justify it to themselves, right? It is profitable to be an asshole. It is profitable to be manipulative. This guy is the ultimate example, and he's literally created an industry of people throughout generations since he's started his bullshit. Now, there's just two more really interesting things. He did a lot of bullshit throughout his life, but two more very fascinating things to me were his one orphan PR stunt. This is where we're getting into some like YouTube family Christian. I'm like, oh my God, there's something for everybody. Number one was his orphan PR stunt scandal. And number two was his cult, his immortal baby sex cult scandal as well. We're looking at this. We're seeing these overlaps between not just modern online marketing, but like charismatic leaders, cult leaders. And there is like a historical precedent for this. And it has bled into the industry of building a business. And there's no escaping it at this point, which is why I'm documenting it, which is why I'm CoMuckraking with you. So I guess at some point he had like 5 marriages. A couple of them were violent. He was an asshole. He left some of his wives and just was like started over again. He was like, okay, I kind of fucked up this marriage, so I'm just going to kind of scrap it, start again. So at one point in time, he was giving a lecture at a university and he just said casually, I'm looking for my dream woman. And some woman was there in the audience. She was like, hey, me. And they literally got married like 48 hours later. And I'm not even freaking kidding you. So this wife of his and him, in order to garner positive PR after one of his scams, one of his businesses went kaput, one of his investors was pissed, they decided to say they were going to adopt and raise 15 orphans and turn them into like the world's perfect children. They only ended up adopting 2, and I feel like they got unadopted in the end. So there was that part of it. They did this as a PR scandal to avoid accountability for some other bullshit they had done. And the second piece, we're going to have a part 2. We're going to have a part 2. I guess I'll leave you on the cliffhanger that the second piece of Napoleon Hill scammery, this is the clickbait of it all, come for the CoMuckraking, stay for the sex cult that involves an immortal baby. I mean, I guess you can Google it and figure it out, but Napoleon Hill was also then involved in a cult called the Royal Fraternity of the Master Metaphysicians. And they at one point got famous. They are famous for trying to raise the world's first immortal baby. Take a baby and make them immortal. As I am in CoMuckraking this summer, diving into the history of the personal brand and how we have arrived at where we are today. And there's all these different types of personal brands today. It's not just the celebrity brand anymore. It's the influencer brand. It's the thought leader brand. It's the author brand. Oh, there's so many more. I think most businesses led by people who are values driven do reach a point where whatever the harm that the systemic problems in our society is within their industry, they can no longer ignore it. And so then becomes like the next level of deepening your relationship to your work, which is a confusing and painful one because it's not profitable to hold yourself as a business owner within the industry that you work in to a higher standard and also humbly try to find a way to lift up the work of people already doing that work. Knowing that if you've arrived at the conclusion that you must do that, you are in a way stepping into a revolutionary radical world where you are saying, I am willing to. The phrase that's coming to mind for me is when I hear people talk about this, and I'm not an expert on it, talking about like betraying whiteness. And I definitely think that if you're going to talk from a place of working towards allyship, which is what we're always doing, we're always working towards it, then deciding to forego, like deciding to make conscious changes to how you approach your work from a perspective of preventing and mitigating harm and creating a better world, knowing that that's not inherently profitable, right? So you're kind of, in a way, getting in your own way. Capitalism and this economic system that we're in is pushing towards growth. But eventually you're going to realize that if in every single industry that is not sustainable and it's harming us. Whether it's the way that like oil companies have gone growth and raped the planet and then destroyed it in many ways and left us with really big problems, environmental problems, health problems. I mean, it goes and goes and goes. You look at any industry and you start to see the massive impact and pain. And we're in like an apocalyptic time when it comes to modern capitalism, okay? And that goes back to this question we were talking about earlier, which is like, I want to build a brand, but I don't want to be sleazy. And the problem isn't the tactics. The problem is people waking up to how capitalism works. When you have to become a business owner, no longer are you a passive consumer just going to the grocery store and buying things and being like, am I being stalked by this company? Do they know too much? Then suddenly you become part of this. You have to do that. And yes, there are ways to mitigate harm and there's ways to do it more responsibly and sustainably, but the system itself is based on manipulation and it's based on profit ultimately comes from a few places and it's almost always from human labor or from resources, from selling things for less than they're worth. That catches up to you somehow.
This is where I ended this episode of CoMuckraking last year, but I'll button it up for you here. When people want a non-sleazy way of marketing their business, I believe that what they're really asking for is a way out of capitalism. As I shared in this episode, there is no do no harm way of existing within capitalism. Most of the products that we are surrounded by, with the very small exception of things like handmade goods that you purchase directly from small creators, make their way through the supply chain, passing through the hands of many workers with environmental impacts as well as the implications of packaging and waste. If you purchase fast fashion or buy your clothes from nearly any major retailer, that clothing has passed through a sweatshop. If you're a Midwesterner like me and you buy fruit in the winter or any food that isn't local to your region, that food has traveled thousands of miles to arrive at your grocery store, and there were people paid less than they should have been to get that food to you. I could go on and on. I speak to many people who proudly boycott Amazon, for example, without realizing that Netflix and Disney Plus both use Amazon's web services. So does Pinterest, Airbnb, NASA, The Guardian. So if you pin things on a mood board, you are supporting Amazon. If you read The Guardian, you are supporting Amazon. If you stay at an Airbnb, you are supporting Amazon. And if you are a tax-paying American, you are supporting Amazon simply because your taxes go to NASA. There is no way to fully divest from the harms of capitalism. We are all participants in this system, whether we like it or not. If you are troubled by what I shared today, then the painful truth I must tell you is that the answers you seek won't be found within this system. We've gone too far for that. There is no easy way to level the playing field or buy our way out of this. All business within this system is sleazy. So then the question becomes, not how do I find an easy ethical swap for running my business the good way, but how do I run a business that mitigates and prevents as much harm as possible while building towards a better answer, a better future outside of the system. In my next episode, I'll talk about the 4 people who will change the world to help you figure out the most effective ways for you to make change within and outside of this system. We don't all need to burn shit down, but we do need all hands on deck. Stay tuned for the next episode for more on what you can do to be part of the change that we need. And spoiler, no, it is not Thinking and Growing Rich. Oh, and should I do a part 2 of this to tell you more about Napoleon Hill and his immortal baby sex cult? Let me know. Talk to you soon. If you want more marketing muckraking and brand strategy gone wild, I invite you to subscribe to this show. And if you enjoyed it, leave me a review. That really helps me out. If you hated it, please send it to your enemies. They sound like good people. You can go to rachelkalbers.com/subscribe to get these updates in your inbox. And because this show is self-sponsored, if you wanted to support my work, you can go to buymearobe.com. That's where the magic happens. In the meantime, remember, it's not the age of the niche, it's the age of the wild card bitch. See you on the internet.